You don't even know what a Tesla is, do you? Tyler Morrison laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound that made the two younger mechanics in the corner of the garage look up from their work. Frank Donovan, the 91-year-old owner of Donovan's Auto Repair, stood with his back to the young man, organizing a row of ancient wrenches on a magnetic strip. His hands, scarred and spotted with age, moved with practiced precision. "It's electric," Frank said quietly, not turning around. "No internal combustion engine, lithium-ion battery pack, regenerative braking, three-phase AC induction motor." Tyler's smirk faltered. "Lucky guess," he muttered. "Torque curve is instant," Frank continued, his voice still calm. 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds in the performance model. Range approximately 350 miles on a full charge, depending on driving conditions and climate control usage. The garage had gone silent. Tyler's two young mechanics, both in their 20s, had stopped working entirely. Frank finally turned, his pale blue eyes meeting Tyler's. "What's the problem with your car, son?" Tyler's mouth hung half open. That confidence, that certainty, all the arrogance that had been there seconds ago, it had evaporated. One of the young mechanics, a guy named Carlos, smiled slightly but tried to hide it. I was just," Tyler stammered, then recovered, pulling his armor of anger back on. "Yeah, okay, you can read Wikipedia, but in practice, in reality, you can't fix that car. It's a computer on wheels. Your toolbox is from the 1950s. Frank folded the black oil-stained rag in his hands carefully, as if time had no meaning at all. 1943, he said quietly. "What?" Tyler frowned. "Some of my tools are from 1943, some are newer, but the oldest ones are from then." Frank tilted his head toward a wooden tool cabinet in the corner. Faded letters across the top read, USARMYA IRFORCES. Tyler looked at him, then at the cabinet, then back at him. "What? You bought military surplus or something?" Frank didn't answer. He just looked at Tyler with that deep, oceanic gaze. And for the first time, Tyler Morrison, 26 years old, son of tech billionaires, felt like someone who knew absolutely nothing. Across the garage, the young mechanic Danny Martinez pulled out his phone. He felt uncomfortable watching this strange, tense scene unfold. Mr. Donovan was a good boss, quiet, kind, never raised his voice. But he was letting this rich kid talk down to him like this. Danny hung out on old veterans' forums. His grandfather was a Vietnam vet. And there was something about Mr. Donovan, that silence, that calm, that reminded him of his grandfather. Tyler, refusing to back down, pulled his iPad from his bag. "Look, let's keep this simple. My car is throwing an error code. High-voltage battery cooling system malfunction. I couldn't get an appointment at the Tesla service center. You're my last option. Can you do it or not?" Frank nodded. "I can." "How long?" "I need to look first. Probably a cooling pump, maybe a sensor. 2, maybe 3 hours." Tyler groaned. 3 hours? Are you serious? At a modern shop, this would take 30 minutes. "Then go there," Frank said simply. Tyler's face flushed. "They're booked for 2 weeks. Weren't you listening?" "Then you'll have to wait," Frank said, turning back to walk toward the Honda Civic. Tyler's iPad buzzed, a message from his father. "You need to be at dinner. 7 p.m. "Don't be late," Tyler sighed. His father wasn't tolerant, especially about him screwing up his Tesla. "Fine, whatever," Tyler said, still with a condescending tone in his voice. "But if you break something, if you make that car worse, I will sue you. Understood?" Frank didn't respond. He just kept working. Tyler stormed out of the garage, slamming the door. Carlos and Danny looked at each other. "Boss," Carlos said slowly, "why do you let him talk to you like that?" Frank reached under the Honda's engine block, tightening a bolt. "Because," he said, his voice tired but patient, "anger always comes from ignorance. That kid doesn't know anything, but he will learn." Danny put his phone back in his pocket. But first, he sent a message. To the old veterans community. Urgent help. Does anyone know of Frank Donovan, 91 years old, mechanic? I think he's an old veteran, but I'm not sure. The response came within seconds. From an old user, username B17 Tail Gunner. Frank Donovan? How do you know him? Danny typed, "I work for him. Why?" A pause. Then, "Give me your phone number. I need to call." 30 minutes later, Danny's phone rang. He went to the back of the garage and answered. "Danny Martinez?" "Yes?" The voice was old, gravelly, but urgent. "My name is Robert Kane. I'm 92 years old, living in Chicago. You work for Frank Donovan?" "Yes, sir." Is Frank still fixing things? Still working? Danny looked toward the garage door, watching Frank work under the Honda. "Yes, sir. Every day. A breath on the other end of the line, maybe a sob. My God, Frank's still alive and still fixing things. Sir, how do you know Frank?" 1944, Robert's voice trembled. "I was a tail gunner on a B-17 Flying Fortress. Frank was our ground crew chief. He was the man who kept that plane flying. After every mission, when we came back torn apart and beaten down, Frank and his crew would make her fly again by morning. He was a genius and a hero." Danny's heart rate quickened. "Sir, Frank never mentioned any of this." "Of course he didn't," Robert laughed bitterly. "Frank never talked about it. But people should know, son, that man saved hundreds of lives, maybe thousands." "How?" Danny whispered. "Because Frank could strip a broken engine and rebuild it, in the sky, under enemy fire, at minus 40 degrees. Once over Frankfurt, we got hit bad. 2 engines dead. Frank was on the radio from the ground, giving the pilot step-by-step instructions to keep the remaining 2 engines running for 3 more hours. We made it back to England. 9 crew members survived. Without Frank's voice, we'd all be dead." Danny's head was spinning. "Sir, can I ask you a favor?" "Anything. Can you get here in a few hours?" 2 hours later, Frank was under Tyler's Tesla. The problem was, as he'd guessed, the cooling pump motor, simple replacement. But the pump was special. Tesla required an original part. Frank called the local supplier by phone. It would arrive tomorrow. Tyler, agitated, paced outside the garage. "Tomorrow? Are you kidding me? I need it today." "I'm sorry," Frank said calmly. "I don't have that part in stock. Special order." "This is unacceptable," Tyler shouted. "I'm paying you." "Fix it." Frank climbed out from under the Tesla, slowly, his joints creaking. He wiped his hands. "Tyler," he said, using his name for the first time. "Sometimes, no matter how much money you pay, some things take time. You need to learn patience." "Don't you teach me about patience?" Tyler pointed his finger at Frank's chest, but he couldn't touch him, because Carlos suddenly stepped between them. "Dude, back off," Carlos said coldly. Tyler hesitated, then stepped back. "You know what? You idiots work for me. Read my reviews. This place will be closed in 6 months." At that moment, a sound came from the garage entrance. "I don't think so." Everyone turned. In the doorway, with a walker, stood an old man. Jeans, leather jacket, and a badge on his chest. B-17 veteran. It was Robert Kane. Frank's face changed with shock. "Robbie?" Robert smiled, tears in his eyes. "Hello, Frank." The 2 old men looked at each other, shook hands, then embraced. Slow, careful, like old friends. Tyler, Carlos, Danny, all watched silently. "How did you?" Frank started. "Danny called me," Robert said, nodding toward the young men. "You've raised good kids." Frank looked at Danny, surprised. Danny shrugged, smiled slightly. Robert turned, looked at Tyler. The young man still stood in the doorway, now uncomfortable, vulnerable. "Are you the one yelling at Frank?" Robert asked, his voice sharp. Tyler nodded, couldn't find his voice. "Do you know this man?" Robert took a step forward, his walker hitting the ground. "This man saved your life, and your father's, and your grandfather's, and everyone in this country." How?" Tyler stammered. Robert pointed to an old photograph hanging on the garage wall. Danny went and took it down, brought it to Tyler. In the photo, a young man, maybe 23, 24 years old, stood in front of a B-17 bomber engine. Tools in his hands, oil stains on his face, something in his eyes, exhaustion, determination, pride. Below, the caption read, "Sergeant Frank Donovan, 91st Bombardment Group, 1943. Tyler looked at the photo, then at Frank. The resemblance was undeniable. That young, strong man, this old, bent, graceful mechanic. Robert began to speak, his voice filling the garage. "In 1943, he said, Frank was the ground crew chief in England, 91st Bombardment Group. Our job was to keep the B-17s flying. Every day, 12 planes would go out. Every day, maybe 8 would come back, torn apart, ripped up, engines dead, wings full of holes. And Frank and his crew would fix them in one night, work until dawn, no sleep, no food, just repair." Robert paused, took a breath. "Once we flew a mission to Frankfurt. The Germans tore us apart. 2 engines were hit, the radio was partially working, the pilot was panicking. But Frank, from the ground, on the radio, gave step-by-step instructions. Adjust the fuel mixture, feather the props, keep the remaining engines at maximum. It took 3 hours. But we made it back to England. 9 men survived. Tyler's face was pale. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Of course you didn't," Robert said sharply, "because Frank never bragged, never wore his medals, never told his stories. He just kept doing his job. Because in Frank Donovan's world, work isn't for bragging. It's for doing." Frank raised his hand gently. "Robbie, that's enough." "No," Robert shook his head. "It's not enough. This kid needs to know." He turned to Tyler. "Your Tesla has a problem?" "A computer error?" This man kept a B-17 Flying Fortress, 4 engines, 13 crew, 65,000 pounds, flying in the sky in the middle of a death dance. Your electric car is a child's toy to him. The silence was heavy. Tyler's eyes on the ground, hands trembling. Carlos and Danny's faces showed pride, respect. Frank touched Robert's arm. "Sit down, Robbie. You're tired." Robert sat. Frank brought him water. 2 old men side by side, 2 monuments carrying the weight of years but still standing. Tyler finally spoke, his voice broken. "I'm sorry, Mr. Donovan. Really, I was a fool." Frank looked at him, no anger in his eyes, just exhaustion. "Did you learn something?" Tyler nodded. "Yes, sir." "Then sorry is enough." The next day, the Tesla part arrived. Frank installed it in 30 minutes. The car ran perfectly. Tyler, making the payment, pulled extra money from his wallet. "Please," he said, voice low, "a donation for the garage." Frank shook his head. "Not necessary. But I want to." "Please." Frank paused, then accepted. "Thank you." As Tyler got in his car, he turned. "Mr. Donovan, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why do you still work?" "At your age, you could have retired." Frank smiled, slight, sad. "Because when an engine breaks, you fix it. When a plane falls, you lift it. When someone needs you, you show up. That's my job. Since 1943, and until I stop, I'll keep going." Tyler nodded, eyes moist. "You're a hero." "No," Frank shook his head. "I'm just a mechanic. The heroes were the ones flying in the sky. I just made them fly. But the story ended 6 months later. Frank Donovan, at 91, passed quietly in his garage beside an engine block. Heart failure, no pain. His funeral was held at the town church. Hundreds came, old customers, neighbors, friends, and Robert Kane with his walker in the front row. Tyler Morrison was there too, suit and tie, eyes red. He gave a speech. "Frank Donovan taught me 3 things," he said, voice trembling. "First, humility. Second, patience. Third, that true greatness is silent." On the coffin lay Frank's old ground crew jacket, and on it a small metal badge, USAAF, 91st Bombardment Group. Carlos and Danny stood by the coffin, hands over their hearts. Robert Kane stood up with difficulty and gave a military salute. The church was silent, but that silence wasn't empty. It was full, with memories, respect, love. After the funeral, Tyler bought the garage. He renovated it, modernized it, but he didn't change one thing. The old tool cabinet with USARMYAIRFORCES written on it, and on the wall, Frank's photograph, young, strong, beside a B-17. Below it, he mounted a plaque, Frank Donovan, 1932 to 2023. He didn't fix engines. He saved lives. Every day, hundreds of customers would come, and every day they would look at that photo, read it, and learn. True heroes are sometimes found in the most unexpected places, sometimes in a garage, sometimes with oil-stained hands, sometimes silently, but always with us. Now it's your turn. This story of Frank Donovan reminds us that the hands that built history are often the same hands we overlook every single day. Who is the unsung mechanic, builder, or creator in your life? Maybe it's the person who fixed your car and saved you from disaster, the teacher who saw potential no one else did, the neighbor who quietly helps everyone. Or maybe it's you, carrying skills and stories no one knows. Tell us in the comments below. Share their name, share what they built, share what they saved. Let's honor the hands that hold us together. And if this story moved you, hit that like button to honor Frank and every forgotten builder. Subscribe to Echoes of Valor for more untold Woo stories. Share this with someone who needs to remember that greatness doesn't announce itself. Tomorrow, we have another story from the greatest generation. One that will remind you that heroism isn't always on the battlefield. Sometimes it's in the workshop, the classroom, the kitchen. Until then, remember Frank's words. When an engine breaks, you fix it. When a plane falls, you lift it. When someone needs you, you show up. That's the job. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering. And thank you for honoring the silent builders who gave everything so we could have everything. We'll see you in the next story.